Well, it seems that we have the wrong sort of weather today. Usually we get torrential rain, and that limits the numbers. I was a little bit concerned when I saw it was 30 degrees today. Not everyone's favourite thing, sitting in a church hall when it's 30 degrees. But never mind, I recognise a lot of faces here from Facebook profile pictures and some of the comments that went with them. Really that's what this evening's all about. Humanising that experience, looking at people's lives, how it's affected you in terms of your working life, your personal life, relationships, your pocket, really kind of all of those key things. And delivering that dossier in September so that we as a group can really take some action on this. Quick run through of what's going to happen this evening. Daisy's going to kick us off and say a few words in a moment. Then Will is going to run an interactive session where we're going to be really taking a deep dive into some of these key elements, effects on health, work, family, financial, travel experience. We know some of the horror stories already. I think we've all gasped when we've read some of the I'm pregnant, I was squeezed up against the door, or I walked with a stick, I couldn't get a seat. Not because people are rude, but because people can't see them. You can't get past them to get on the train. We'll run that into a group session feedback and give you the opportunity to, again, interject further into any of those topics. But really, let's as a group get as much as we can out tonight, take that deeper dive, think about really how much further we want to go. So it's all about creating a platform. Let's keep to the timetable, let's not create too many delays, and most importantly, let's make sure you all get home on time tonight, which is our aim. So Daisy, would you... Train 101.
I'm not going to talk for long, so I'm going to make a few little points. The first thing I want to say is a massive thank you, because this event has been put together by volunteers, our Facebook group is run by volunteers, our Twitter feed is run by volunteers, and volunteers who've put all of this stuff together. Enormous thanks to Will, who many of you I think have been receiving little bits of paper outside the front of the station. Danny as well has done a huge job putting together the first draft of the dossier that we'll talk about and doing loads of stuff outside the station and sorting out the protest. Tommy and Annie and Lynn, loads of volunteers just getting involved because they're just so pissed off about the trains, right? So thank you to all of you for putting in so much work. I can give you just a brief piece of information about why I set up this group and what we're trying to do with it. So the new timetable, as you know, came in on the 20th of May. Back in February, I had been told by local residents that the new timetable was going to be a disaster. So I did a little video and I put it out on Facebook and there was a little bit of traction, but I knew back in February that it was going to be a problem, and so the industry sure as hell knew it was going to be a problem, and now I'm pretending that they didn't know, and they're all saying, oh no, it was another bit of the industry, it was that bit of the industry, it was that bit of the industry. We knew it was going to be a problem back then as members of the public, so the fact that they were trying to cover it up, in my book, is absolutely disgusting, and I really want us to get to the bottom of that. So I commute 4 days a week at least, sometimes 5 days a week, and I experienced the chaos of the new timetable like all of you, and I thought, well, I'm really angry about this. I'm going to go along to a public meeting of the Association of Passengers and Transport Users, and I'm going to really sound off about how awful this is, because the Thameslink buses are going to be there. So I came to this meeting room here, and the Thameslink buses weren't here, because they put a ban on doing any public engagements for 2 weeks, and they weren't going to come to the meeting, so they cancelled and didn't turn up. And so I still took part in the meeting, and I think Will, you were here, and Councillor Jackie Taylor came along as well, and maybe a couple of others were at that meeting. And the APTU know an awful lot about the trains. They know an awful lot about timetables, they know an awful lot about how the industry works, they know a huge amount about the different players and who the managers are, and they have that very close relationship. What they don't do, in my view, is to collect the sort of passenger experience, and they're not really designed to be advocates for passengers. And I sat in that meeting, and the whole tenor of that meeting was, well, this many trains have been cancelled, this many trains have been delayed, this is the problems with the integration of the timetables. And I said, all of that is fine, very interesting, but what about the impact it's having on people's lives? Is anybody collecting that information? Does DFT, does the Department for Transport collect that? Office for Rail and Road, Passenger Transport Group, APTU, who collects that information? Does anybody collect it? And they said, no one collects that information at all. And I said, well, this is ridiculous. And they said, we've got no mechanism to collect all this evidence about the impact on people's lives. So I thought, well, I'll set up a Facebook group. So that's what I did. I set up a Facebook group and explicitly said, this is to collect the evidence that we need to have a strong voice to tell people that this is the impact it's having. Because up until that point, the only focus had been on how many trains are delayed, how many trains are cancelled. That was it. That was the only focus of the newspaper stories. So when we started getting stories on the Facebook group about, as Danny said, women who are pregnant and not be able to get onto the train, people with vulnerabilities and physical disabilities who couldn't get a seat, just the general kind of squeezing in, the chaos of disruption, people getting school fines because they're an hour late collecting their children. We put all of that information together. Danny put it together in a dossier. He managed to do it one night when he was waiting for Terry to come off the train, and I think you were an hour late, so he sat in the hall and put this dossier together. Very useful, good use of time. And I sent that information to the Transport Select Committee, and I think I'm sure most of you will know, but this is a cross-party group in Parliament of MPs from every party who are there to scrutinise the government and to hold them to account. So we sent them this document and said, right, this is what's going on, this is the impact it's having on people's lives in St Albans. And they said, this is brilliant, this is absolutely brilliant, because these MPs on this committee really want to know what the impact is, but we can't find out. And normally we only receive written evidence, because we got a screenshot of the worst examples from what people have been putting on the Facebook group. They had a real sense of how it was impacting on people's lives. So they said to us, we're just about to open an inquiry, we'd love you to submit some more evidence. And I said, great, tell me the terms of reference. So they went away and had a discussion, and he came back and said, look, based on some of the evidence that you sent us, we don't want to limit the scope of the inquiry too much. So we're going to keep it really broad so that you can effectively say whatever you want. And he said, and by the way, if any of you in St Albans know people who commute on other parts of the line, if whether it's up in Bedford or whether it's down in Croydon, if they want to set up a passenger group and collect the same information, we said, please encourage them to do the same thing. So if any of you do that, if you know anybody, then please do let them know and encourage them and tell them what we're doing so that we can get other passengers to chip in. So very briefly, that's what we did. I'm a Lib Dem, some of you may know that. I contacted our Lib Dem spokesperson in the Lords on transport and said to her, look, I've got some serious questions here. One of the quickest things you could do to alleviate the pressure on the Thameslink line is to reinstate the stops of the East Midlands line at Bedford and Luton. And that is a decision of the Minister. Can you please ask this question in Parliament? And she said, yeah, okay, no problem. And she did ask the question in Parliament, and the answer she got back was a complete fob off, and it wasn't really an answer at all. And it was, they're looking at the timetable, they're reviewing progress, they're going to have a think about it, and then they'll make a decision in due course. But the Minister could, at the stroke of a pen, decide to reinstate those stops in order to shift some of the sheer volume of passengers on the Thameslink line back onto East Midlands, but they're still refusing to do that. It's enormously frustrating. We've got a mention in the House of Commons, Tom Brake is a Lib Dem MP, and he's down in Sutton, so at the other end of our Thameslink line, and we knew that he was going to speak on this debate, so I sent him the dossier as well and said, look, can you just mention the plight of people in St Albans, because I certainly don't feel like I've got a voice on this. So we've had petitions, there's been a protest at St Pancras, we've got quite a lot of media coverage as well, locally and nationally. Jackie, who's a Lib Dem councillor for St Peter's Ward in the centre of the city here, she's actually managed to set up managed to persuade the council to set up a rail scrutiny group. They were going to have their meeting, I think, in the first or second week of September, which was after the deadline for submitting this evidence. So she's now managed to bring that meeting forward, persuading them all to do that, which is brilliant. And so the next big thing that we're doing, and why we're all here this evening, is because we want to build an even bigger dossier of evidence. And Lynn's been doing a brilliant job pulling together lots of different themes, which really helps the MPs to look at this stuff. And the inquiry, as I said, is quite wide, and they just want to see as much evidence as possible about the impact so that they can do a few things, really. First of all, we know there are going to be further timetable changes. There were supposed to be timetable changes coming down the track, in December this year. They've already said they're not going to implement some of those things, but there will have to be some more timetable changes in December and then further on. So if there's anything we can say in terms of what can the train operators do, what kind of questions MPs can ask to make sure we don't have the same fiasco, that's one really important thing. And then the second thing is how do we hold the train companies to account? we've got this absolute bowl of spaghetti in terms of the different actors in all of this, and it's really important, I feel, that passengers know who to complain to and how to make proper complaints so we can get proper compensation and make sure this never happens again. So that's why we're here. Thank you all so much for coming. And over to Will. I think he's going to talk us through the kind of themes that we've developed so far and how you're going to build on that tonight. Yeah?
Quite right.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm actually just going to get a photo of spaghetti up, not a photo, a diagram of spaghetti, in order to show you just what we are dealing with. So, as Daisy was describing, we're dealing with a bit of a messy sector. There's lots of actors that don't communicate well to one another, and it's really unclear at first glance how you might seek to influence that sector. So we've got the Department of Transport, which is in charge, right? They're responsible for setting setting transport strategy, including strategy for the rails. They're in charge of franchising, both letting out the franchises and then also managing them, vitally managing them. And then they're also responsible for investing in the track, which they do through Network Rail. They've franchised out to Govia, right? And the OOR, the Office for Road and Rail, is responsible for overseeing Network Rail and also for some aspects of the franchises. So Govia are quite an interesting company. They're not publicly traded, so we can't buy shares in Govia. They're owned wholly by Go-Ahead, which owns masses and masses of the transport in the UK, like huge amounts. Something like 60–70% of the bus routes, like loads and loads of rail, and that's the Go-Ahead group that is publicly tradable. Govia have two franchises, GTR and Southeastern. GTR is where the problems probably start. GTR includes Thameslink, that's our train links, our train services, the Gatwick Express, Great Northern and Southern. Every single one of those franchises has had at some point kind of special measures. So somewhere in this system, the government keep on giving these franchises to a company that is clearly failing in every single one of its franchises. Which is why we think it's important not only to target through our campaign Thameslink, who's the company responsible for messing up our commute every day, but also the government, who's responsible for overseeing it and for giving this franchise to a company that has failed in every single one of its current franchises. So that's why we're targeting the government, and the clear way to hold the government to account is through the Select Committee. The Select Committee's role is to question the Minister, question the Secretary of State and the officials at the department about what went on, why were mistakes made and what they're going to do to improve the situation. And as Daisy mentioned, partly through her and our intervention, the scope of this inquiry is much wider than most inquiries conducted by Select Committees. They quite like to ask quite narrow questions because that helps the MPs to give clear answers. But there's broadly three questions in this inquiry. The first is what went wrong, and that, I think we can understand that in quite a wide way. So what went wrong doesn't just include, well, this manager didn't hire enough drivers early enough, kind of internal stuff within the industry. It should also be what went wrong for us, right? If you've missed appointments, if you've, as we've talked to people who've missed funerals, missed weddings, missed seeing their child go to bed for days on end. That's part of going wrong as well, and as Daisy pointed out, that kind of human side just isn't looked at. Where does responsibility lie? That might be less in our scope to provide evidence on. That's kind of for the technical people, as far as I'm concerned. That might be for the technical people to answer. But then how can the industry put things right? Well, putting things right isn't just about getting trains running on time and improving the service going forward. It's also about reparation for the stress and the heartache and the health impact and just the experience of having a terrible commute every day, is putting that right as well. And I think we should be quite bullish. Someone joked on the Facebook group that we should be asking for spa vouchers in order to repair the damage, the stress of the experience of travelling on Govia for 2 months. I think that's exactly the sort of thing we should be saying to the MPs, because that represents the human costs that we've all suffered as passengers. So what we're now going to do is, as Daisy mentioned, is kind of in tables discuss some themes that have come through on the Facebook group, and we're going to try to record some more examples of the health impacts, the work impacts, the family impacts, the financial costs, and the experience of travelling. Try to record some more examples, so tell us your stories and capture them on the kind of A3 sheets on the tables. We're going to try to kind of understand those and make some conclusions about what's gone wrong. And then we're going to try to make some recommendations to the parliamentarians about what we think should be done about it. So there's 3 questions. Three questions. What are your examples? What are our collective conclusions? And then thirdly, what are our recommendations about what should be done about it? We are slightly diminished in numbers compared to what we had perhaps hoped for. That's for a number of reasons, including the weather, but also I've just been seeing on Twitter there's a buckled line at Radlett, so trains aren't getting through. So that could well be playing a part as well. Maybe there'll be a rush of hundreds in any minute now. I think probably easiest if we kind of split into groups by themes. So maybe, shall we say kind of sort of health impact, or maybe health and family over there? Is that too stereotypical to put health and family together? Maybe not. Health and family over there, work and finance over here, and the experience of travelling over here. You get into those 3 groups and we'll capture your thoughts. And we'll just spend a bit of time doing that, approximately half an hour, and then we'll feed back to the room.
Because if you've been somewhere for a period of time and they know you, then they're like, oh, it's fine, just make the time out.
I'm the boss. So
yeah.
I'm late on the train, I'm like, well, that's the boss. Well, give yourself a slap.
Well, I'm lucky in that I'm self-employed, and when I travel, I go in about 3 or 4 days a week, and they're very laid back. Bizarrely, one of my clients is the government, and they're very laid back about it, particularly as I'm in the same building as the ORR. But I only get paid for the time I'm there. I don't get paid a fixed fee. I get paid for the hours that I work. And on one occasion, and to be fair, that wasn't down to Thameslink, but I did miss an entire half day because that was when there was a problem with the track. But having said that, the track had been repaired by 7:30 in the morning. And what the problem was I turned up at the station at 8 o'clock and there were 200 people on the pavement, unable to get in.
Work and finance. Work and
I work with a
finances.
stick, so I was in a taxi, so I just said to the taxi driver, just keep going and take me home again. So I literally did this round trip and then sat at home, checked what was happening, and it was only until, I think it was about 10:30, 11, about 10:30 when the train started to sort of work. But then I work in 2 different places on that day, so I do half a day and then half a day, and I wasn't going to get to the first one until about 11:30, and I leave at 12, so I lost an entire half a day's pay.
I have to take annual leave quite a lot because if I can't come to work, the trains are buggered. Like, I know it's Network Rail,
but it isn't only that, because as I say, when it was the problem with the signalling, it was Network Rail that had to sort it out, and it potentially, I don't know what the problem was, it might have been their fault, but it happened.
Sort out the
But as I say, it had been done by 7:30. Now obviously they're not going to be able to start running the trains by 8, so they're all in the wrong place. But if they hadn't been able to run any trains up until 7:30, you almost sort of think, could they not just start the timetable that they would have started at 5:30 at 7:30? you know, because all the trains will be where they're expected to be at that time. So, you know, I just feel that they, A, don't really take a very sensible approach to it, and B, just don't tell you what's happening.
Well, I was trapped in London, well, twice actually. First time a few weeks ago. I can't remember what happened exactly, but there was no trains and there was buses. It was in the new timetable actually, something happened. And there was no one in the station at King's Cross telling us where to go, or, you know, and we was waiting what we thought was in a queue for the bus. The bus went straight past, went to the end of the queue and everyone went rushing over, no one in the station. And then everyone's like, well, what are we going to do? And like...
This is, sorry to interject here, Tom. I think that's one of the key elements that's come across when it goes wrong.
There is an issue with on the Carnage tickets specifically.
Is everybody all right if I film?
Yep, that's fine. So what I've tended to do is I don't write the date on it until I know there's a train, because otherwise what you don't want is to have a date committed and then discover there is no train. Yeah. So I did go through the barrier to Albans station a couple of weeks ago without putting the date on, because I saw there was a train and I went through. And I did get ticket checked, and I still hadn't put the date on. Now, in fairness, the guard was actually very nice about it, and I explained, and he obviously thought I had an honest face or something, or he was in a good mood that day, and it was okay. Presumably, if I'd had another ticket revenue control inspector, or whatever they're called, it may not have had such a happy ending.
Well, with writing the, I forgot what you were saying now. About
the date.
Yes. So they've got this policy at the moment where they won't let you go through the gate with a written out carnet. You always have to go to the guard and show them.
They don't.
And when you've got 200 people between you and the guard, it's infuriating. And you think at this present time.
No, the carnet users are constantly treated like criminals. Their assumption is that you're trying to cheat the system. That's their starting point, isn't it?
And so often and that is the phrase, isn't it? The phrase that everyone uses over and over again.
And the carnets they issue at St Albans, often there's a batch that doesn't go through the machine, so you have to.
Well, that's because they turn the machine.
That's the setting,
so they won't accept.
Well, you know, sometimes it works. I mean, in London it seems to work.
Well, I mean, they could obviously easily solve this problem, couldn't they? If there was some kind of touch in, touch out. I mean, it's not beyond the wit of
they have
technology.
The key pass. How they can't use that for a carnet ticket.
Can we stick that in one of the recommendations? That'd be a good one to capture.
A key pass.
Well, they already have this smart parcel.
Okay, so a touch-in, touch-out version for carnet.
Only for season tickets. And you could just put 30 credits on it or whatever.
There would be multiple
other
advantages, because the lunacy of having to I mean, my wife goes in on a similar system, so we kind of juggle off-peak and peak and in and out, and it's very frustrating if you end up without the ticket that you need for the right time. I mean, it's a ridiculous system, really, isn't it?
Having to wait
if you just had a swipe through, it would make things so much more sense.
Presumably the idea is that it makes people more inclined to just go for the more expensive season ticket because it's easier.
What I mean is, the train drivers drive the trains and then manage through Govia, right?
Yeah. So all right if I film?
Who's running who, basically?
What sort of thing is going on is this is why there's a 12-week lockdown. Well, supposedly meant to be the 12-week lockdown for timetables. Is that they start planning the timetable and they've got the different competing companies, because Thameslink are not the only one operating on this line. So East Midlands Trains are putting in their sort of wants, demands, what they'd like, and what fits in with the franchise commitments that they're meant to deliver. Thameslink are putting in theirs, and then obviously in the southern parts of the network there's the interaction, although they may also run the Gatwick Express, but then the different lines that are going on down there. That all comes back to Network Rail. They then go, right, we can do the diagrams, right, we can diagram all this. This is what we think we can deliver. That might not totally match what each company put in, so then they get it back and go, right, okay, can we deliver this? That's why there's meant to be that 12-week lockdown, so they've got 12 weeks to sort out what they actually need to do to deliver that finalised timetable. And in 2 weeks, which is what they ended up with, they couldn't do it. But they did know, I'm fairly sure, I believe they knew there were problems, and it's how much of a fuss did they actually raise. Because they should have known, because as you were saying, they're the ones who have the drivers. When they've got that, they know how many drivers they've got, where they're stationed. Is there a driver to match a train? So they must have known, they may not have known, because 2 weeks was not long enough, they may not have been able to say, whatever, there were going to be 250 trains we can't run. But they should have known, and I believe they would have known, there are a lot of trains we can't run. We can't tell exactly how many, but it's over 100, and we haven't had the time to work it all out.
Because when I think about an airport, I go, Heathrow runs out with BAA, National Air Traffic Control, you've got all the different airlines and the crews, you've got Menzies doing aviation support, you've got the fueling rigs. They all seem to be able to sort it out. So why is there...
Except immigration.
Yes, but I mean...
Because they don't staff immigration and arrivals to match the flight schedule.
No, sure, that's but I mean, that's kind of like border control, just to decide what they want to do. But I mean,
exactly.
But I mean, in this situation, I kind of don't, it feels like nobody's responsible apart from someone pushing out a timetable that's inaccurate. It's like someone just going, I'll have your project done in 2 weeks, and everyone meanwhile going, what? But then everyone trying to do it and just doing it really badly. And I'm just like, well, surely someone, who does the book stop with? I don't see in that mix who anything stops with.
Well, ultimately, it's great.
Because they're the ones pushing. If there's this 2 week rush of the timetable delivery, then that's top down saying we must hit that deadline. For no particular reason, other than trying to get all the eggs to the...
I do find it a bit laughable that they,
You said that I thought absolutely right.
3 days a week, sometimes that's 4. I thought doing it any more than that just makes people so
question for people that run the railways, all those organisations, how do they currently establish what the user experience is of the railways? Because we're not seeing any evidence that they have any, other than some quantitative numbers which we have established are not indicative of reality.
Do we also, as a conclusion, want to talk about the fact that, the compensation they're offering, albeit wholly inadequate and only focused on a small minority of passengers, but it's also only a financial compensation. So therefore, do we want to think about the fact of what other ways are there that they could compensate, or what recommendations can we make of different ways that they can compensate? And I don't know what that might be. I mean, I'm just coming back towards spa days, but also, is there, I don't know, could they do more to support their passengers? Do they need to think about, for example, who are the most badly affected? Certainly seem lots of pregnant ladies affected. Do they need to think about, okay, what can we do for pregnant ladies as compensation for this? How can we, don't ask me, I've never been pregnant, don't do kids, but there must be something that they could do specifically for the groups of people who've been affected. So pregnant ladies, disabled passengers, and then people who've been affected by their work. Maybe it's not just about, okay, you've had inconvenience, so you bunch over there can have a bit of a refund. Perhaps they just need to think more widely about targeted and nicely designed compensation for the specific affected groups of customers.
Well, there may be a communication point there too, because part of it also is that if you're arriving late for work every day, some of us might just pay in sort of, people think you're skiving or slacking or whatever. Some people might actually lose their job. Yeah. So, is there any sort of formal communication they could do to actually say, no, like you legitimately are on, you get a doctor's note if you're sick. Like really, like you're legitimately on a train line, which is has fallen down, and there's no reasonable way that you can even get there reliably. I mean, I would be so stressed if I had a job where I was going to have my pay cut, or you know.
But that happened to me. I had to take annual leave because I was so late for work every day. I had to take a day of annual leave, and because I was on a 6-month contract, I was intending to take my annual leave as paid at the end of the contract, and ended up not getting the money. So there was a true financial impact as well as embarrassment, really. It's not what you want. So can we maybe get that as a
It's to do with the work theme, isn't it? That example,
but it works for all of them, because I think we're going back to pregnant people with health. So it's about targeted compensation for the different groups.
I'm going to call it there, guys, because we do want to stay on time. I think some very good conversation there, a lot written down. I've asked Liz to actually record this last session in full because my note taking isn't very good, both in terms of speed and readability. So what we're going to ask is that each group report out. Okay, we're going to hand the microphones round for this. Then there'll be a quick kind of, if you have anything else you want to interject on that, anything that comes into that section, then we'll drop that in. So the first group we'd like to report out is going to be this group over here who had health and family. One or all? Terry, here you go.
Okay. Should I stand? Okay. So we had health and family. Is this on?
No.
Yeah? No. It just doesn't seem like it's on. It's on. Okay. Right. So we had health and family. So in terms of experience, we've listed these different things. First of all, reduced time with children. So kids who have to go to bed at a set time, and the inability to know when you will be home, or to spend the hour that you might normally get with them before they go to sleep. General loss of structure and routine, so kids are part of it, but many people have other caretaking or family responsibilities, and so the inability to even guess when you might arrive home is totally unhelpful for various different people who might rely on you. Inability to meet family commitments, so you might say that you're going to see a school performance or arrive at something to support a partner, and you don't do it, or you can't do it. And then switching into the trains themselves, I think anyone who's been on one of these trains can vouch for the fact that just being on a train that overcrowded, that late, that inconsistent is an enormous stressor. The overcrowding of the carriages, we think, is certainly dangerous at times. I know that we keep hearing that the trains are built to be loaded up with people and it's no problem at all, but I think if you've been stuck in the center with nothing to hold on to, you know that it certainly doesn't feel particularly safe as you whiz around bends. General sense of anger and frustration from other commuters on the train makes for a pretty unpleasant and stressful ride for everyone. And then just a general point around the total lack of communication from the train company, the lack of acknowledgement of the extent of the issues and the personal toll that the situation takes on the passengers is just an additional frustrator. The lack of acknowledgement of the human cost that is attached to these issues, and the inability of the staff to help, either because they themselves are so stressed and depleted by the situation, or because they haven't been told what's going on. But in a normal situation, you would hope that the staff could give you a steer, and that's generally not been the case. So we've reached some conclusions. The first conclusion is that it seems to us that the performance metrics that these trains are operating on are absolutely must not be representative of the passenger experience. So where in those metrics has anybody thought about passenger satisfaction, about what actually matters to the people who are riding the trains? It seems like, to the extent that these companies are being judged at all, no one's taking that into account. Compensation, so there's been a lot said about the inadequacy of the compensation scheme that's been proposed, and we feel that it needs a much broader think in terms of not just different kinds of ticket holders, which has been talked about a lot, but in terms of compensation that is targeted to particular passenger groups, pregnant passengers, parents, other people who have different impacts. A long-term approach, we think, is really needed to start thinking about these problems and coming up with solutions. Pre-May, the situation was certainly better, but we don't really believe that that should be the benchmark for where we're trying to get to. I think that the goal should be
great service, and that doesn't seem to be even a thought in any of the train operators' heads at this point. So can we not hold the trains to a higher standard than even before this whole debacle happened a couple of months ago? We think we should. So in terms of recommendations, one thing that could be a great addition are, well, a couple of things, I guess. So independent customer satisfaction survey. So could we bring in a third party to actually create and administer a survey so that they would get some real unbiased data in terms of how happy customers were or not. Could we have a passenger steering group? Is there a passenger steering group? Maybe, I don't know. It's a question that we should ask. Can we look at international train networks for learnings? I think we've all looked with envy on places like Japan and Germany and thought, how come it works there and not here? So surely there are some best practices that we can take from other countries. Compensation for all users, so financial, non-financial compensation. Everyone here agrees that spot passes are an excellent idea. And there probably are some other things, and maybe there's compensation that can focus on specific impacts. This next one is, I think, a really good one. To have as a basic operating principle that the train companies will provide quality information and accurate information, even if it's not what people want to hear. The idea that you actually can believe what they tell you would, I think, alleviate a lot of stress and frustration. Thinking about performance metrics, so I guess diving into the performance metrics to understand what they really mean. So what is the definition of on time? What is the definition of late? I don't think we really know, because it seems like there's a lot of fudging going on and a lot of maneuvering going on, probably to improve the sort of optics of those metrics. So it'd be good to dive into that and really understand what those look like. And then finally, do we have a passenger charter? Could we have a passenger charter? And I think just as a general point, how can we as passengers really develop a voice that can be a long-term voice for these services that we all depend on? And that, I think, is it.
7, 8 recommendations there. I think some very interesting points, certainly on the metrics piece, the personal feedback, having the operator start accounting for that, rather than just talking about where trains are on time. Passenger steering group, I think, is something that we've touched on briefly within the group as well, and I'm sure will come up again. And types of compensation, and I think one of the other groups is going to talk about that as well. So thank you. Group A, let's call you. Does anyone have anything else they want to add to that on the topic of health and family? Did they cover everything, or?
No, they didn't cover everything. Many years ago, there was a passenger's charter, and in it said that they gave an indication of when you should be able to expect to get a seat. And when First Capital Connect took over the franchise, they removed that from the passenger's charter.
Jackie? Okay. Right, who would like to go next? Ah, you want to be chosen. Okay. Yeah, I might as well have just left that there. There you go. Local economy, we're on to now. Over to Jackie.
Is this on?
Top, push the button up. Yeah, it's on.
Okay. I sort of added this one in as we had so many different pubs, bars, and restaurants around St Albans give indications that their takings were down. So I thought I just wanted to explore this one a little bit, and from my own personal experience of either what I've done, my husband's done, or what my friends have done. I know people who have stayed in London purposefully to watch World Cup games because they did not think they would get back in time to watch them. Danny has spoken to the landlord of the pub that's just across the road from here. It's taken down. People were not coming back to watch games, they were staying in London. I've had some friends who had to cancel a restaurant booking. Me and my husband have not made restaurant bookings that we would have otherwise made because we did not know if he would get back. So that's all money that we know, we definitely know we did not spend when we otherwise would have done. The discussion amongst us then broadened out wider about, because I wrote a broad theme at the top saying local economy, so there are other factors. My personal concern was about the numbers of pubs, bars, restaurants who are in the industry that was new is impacted. We also considered other things. The taxis, we don't know if their takings are definitely up. I haven't actually spoken to any taxi drivers, so I can't comment. Danny feels that Uber may have had more takings, but whether that is local,
more takings from me,
or whether
I don't know about the rest of the group,
or whether those drivers are actually based elsewhere and in London, so it's actually money still not being spent locally, but it's a cost then to people locally, and they otherwise, if their money is then spent there, then that money is then not available for them to spend elsewhere in numbers that they may have done. If more people have worked from home, have they perhaps spent money locally that they didn't otherwise? How much of a factor could that be to negate some of the other stuff? But obviously what pubs, bars, restaurants are telling us, it doesn't, we can only take what they're perhaps saying, have more takeaways perhaps being purchased. Possibly, but a takeaway is a lot cheaper than a meal in a restaurant with the alcohol of what may be spent. So while some things may be up, some businesses may have seen an increase, some haven't, and obviously jobs are supported in those establishments and in the supply chains of those. We also at the beginning just had a bit of a random discussion about sort of timetable changes and trying to understand things amongst us and considering questions that we might like the Transport Select Committee to consider, and was around the timetable change. Did the industry ask for longer than the normal 12-week lockdown on timetable changes? This was a massive, massive change. Did they need longer than 12 weeks? Did they ask for it? What protestations did the industry make about receiving less than the 12 weeks that they should have done? What did they actually say back to the Department for Transport? What was the Department for Transport's response if they did ask those questions? And then looking at why was the date in May chosen? Why is December not chosen? And obviously furthering, going back to the first points of why did they not delay it and things like that. In terms of business, it's hard to make the recommendations. I did forget to talk about that, but I did wonder whether, as the government seems to be in charge of business rates, if they affect businesses so badly and those businesses can prove it, should they receive something back on their business rates?
Thanks, Jackie. So, definitely, I mean, I occasionally pop in the horn. And Jason actually very much said that his rush hour business is down. And I think we were talking over here. Maybe you go for a pint a couple of times a week. If you've been late twice this week, you're not going to the pub. So I think that. Sorry.
Well, I would say presumably one of the bigger impacts as well one of the bigger impacts as well is just on the reputation of the town as a commuting disaster. Because there was at least one person on the Facebook group who said, I'm not going to move to St Albans after all because it's clearly a nightmare to travel from there. So in the medium term, it will have a huge economic impact if people avoid coming here. I mean, when we moved here, the only anxiety we had was hearing that the commute was a problem. And that was before all of this. So, what impact is that having on people who are thinking of coming here and seeing that the stations along the route are having all these problems?
Absolutely
we
right.
could ask local estate agents, couldn't we?
Well, they keep their powder very dry. I was reading one the other day. House prices are not falling and everything's great. But I think these are. Yeah, definitely. These are the people that are talking to us, though, and certainly within the group, from what I've read, 2 people choosing not to move to St Albans because of it, 1 moving out of St Albans because of it, and someone else who's changed from a role where they were commuting to something where they're working locally. We're trying to boost tourism in St Albans. We're building hotels, things like that. What kind of effect does it have? I think there's definitely a deeper dive to be had on that. Thank you, Jackie. Any other experiences on the local economy? Anything? A lot of it probably resonates about buying takeaways late, missing the Cosa Nostra. Again, I occasionally pop in there, and they've been affected by it. That's that. Okay, so next group, we're going to go to Group C, which is
Well, we would
experience of travel.
Experience of travelling. So I don't want to repeat a lot of what you were saying, which was very well put, and you covered many of the points that we were discussing. But I'll see if I can point to a few things to add to what has been said already. One of the issues that came up was the carnet, and using carnets to travel, and the general sort of sense that if you're a carnet user, then you're somehow possibly a bit of a cheat, and treated in that way by staff and the system for checking your ticket. And we think that's unreasonable, and the way that the carnets have been excluded from discussions of compensation and so on would be something of concern there. In terms of the actual experience of travelling, we talked about the uncertainty involved of never knowing whether there's going to be a train, what the delays are going to be, and the general stress and anxiety that builds up when you're constantly having to worry about that. We talked about the overcrowding and having to stand, and the suggestion was that there should be a reduction in the price of the ticket if you are forced to stand. And they're aware that the train companies know exactly how many people are on the train at any one time, so it shouldn't be impossible for them to be able to do that. And we talked about the overcrowding and the many different people and experiences of difficulty that brings. One recommendation I thought was very useful was that there should be a place, if someone has a special assistance need, there should be a clear place on the platform in the station that they can go to get it, because at the moment there is no such provision. We talked about information and the lack of it and all the problems with boards and staff and not knowing what's going on. This just seems to be a question of better organisation and staffing to help that. Also, the complete impossibility of complaining, the impossibility of complaining, and the impracticality of delay repay. When every single journey is affected, to really use delay repay is just not possible. And then, on the basis that people don't appear to be complaining and asking for refunds, the train company turns around and says we have great customer satisfaction. Not the case. So generally the claims for the timetable revisions we discussed, and the degree to which they are extremely disingenuous. Claims about adding capacity, more trains, customer satisfaction, clearly that's not been the case at all. And we discussed the things like the difference. So this is something I thought was incredible. There is an incentive to the train companies for their trains to be late, because the compensation that they get from the government for late trains is slightly more than they pay out to the customers who receive repayments. So if their trains are a little bit late, then they actually benefit from that. And this is, it would be very interesting to know where that arrangement came from. So in terms of recommendations, we talked about extending the Oyster card or a key pass as far as Luton, so that just to reduce overcrowding when you're trying to get in and out of the station, and better information, and making it, when the next franchise comes up, including passengers and passenger experiences as part of the decision-making process, and also ensuring that there are real incentives and consequences for the companies that run the trains if they get things wrong. Because clearly one of the big problems here has been that there aren't any real reasons for them to get it right, and so they don't. And that's the government's fault and the system's fault, and that has to be fixed.
common themes starting to be very good. Passenger groups came up again. That's the third group that's mentioned it. So I think we'll be developing that out a little bit further. We've seen the comments on the Oyster and the key pass piece. I find the carnets an absolute joke. And the fact that people are basically treated like a criminal for using them, where there's a simple technological solution that exists and is in place. No one's mentioned the, 3 back gates if you come out on the car park side as yet. There's only 3 exit points where you've got maybe 800 people coming off a train.
That's already changed as part of the final review.
Okay, it's not going up by very much, so it's going up to 2, yeah, so it's going up to 5, yeah. Yeah.
Well, then ask for more than, ask for the number one rather than say there's 3 cars.
Okay. But I think that passenger experience extends to as you come off the train, what's your experience buying a ticket, coming through this train station, coming out, that's where the pushing and shoving occurs.
The ticket machines don't work. Then you have to run across that busy road just to...
The bridge as well. If you end up in the middle platform, the queue sometimes just to get up the bridge are incredible.
Also,
sorry, I'm just going back because I've forgotten one of the points. We had ticket machines, the bridge, and
the barriers.
could they do the stairs that, like some of the underground stations, that there was a barrier going down the middle so that people would go one way? Because if you're at the top of the stairs trying to get on a train that everybody's trying to get off,
Won't work.
Not allowed to find it.
I think one of the other things, I'm going to raise this, the amount of times I go to a sporting event or get on a plane and I've bought my ticket in advance and I've got a, what's it called? QR code, yeah. I knew it. A QR code. Why can't you buy a ticket online and scan that? You know, that's the way the rest of the world's working now.
It works in secure environments.
Okay.
Train stations and technologies.
Okay.
You can do it.
They have it at King's Cross.
Yeah.
So St Pancras is an international train station in a secure environment. Okay, I would not rate Luton or St Albans in the same category. Anything's doable with enough money, but and what we find even with the ticket machines, with railway estates, anything that breaks does not get fixed quickly.
No, true.
We shouldn't accept that, should we?
No.
And they're not being broken through vandalism. So I didn't know what they did because these guys had working packs. So who's our speaker over here? But thank you very much again. Very good. Who's speaking?
Do you want... I'll make sure writing.
Hand it around.
Oh,
Experience.
Alright guys.
Tommy.
Okay, we've got work and financial costs and impacts. So I'm just going to read the list rather than, you know. So we've got being regularly late during a probation period, which I think it's Anne that was here. She was barely scraping by her probation period because she was always late, and you know, unless you're the boss, no one can believe you that, you know, you're late because they probably think you're doing something else, or, you know, just lazy, or, you know. Also we have longer hours due to disruption, so you're turning up to work extra early because you'll be late, so you're there potentially not getting paid, or in my case I have to take holidays quite usually because I can't get to work, or I'm late every day, or, you know, things like that. So we've got difficulty for passengers with physical disabilities due to busier trains, and which what you were saying about how...
If I used to take the view of an evening that I could let 1 or 2 trains go so that I could get a seat, and that would delay me by 10 minutes or maybe 15 minutes. If I do that now, it's likely to be nearer to 40-45 minutes if I let a couple of trains go through before I get on one. And that's a huge extension to a journey of an hour, you know.
I really like that suggestion from the last group about a kind of special needs area or designated carriages or things like that.
At the moment, you can ask to get a badge pass thing.
Yeah.
In order to get it, you have to prove disability or get a letter from a doctor, and then it gives you a card that says you can ask people to give you a seat. That's all it does. It doesn't entitle you to anything. And I frankly can't really see the point, because actually I find people are generally very kind and helpful and willing to give up seats if you can get to a seat. The reason I don't get on a train when it's rammed is because I can't get to a seat for somebody to give it to me.
Yeah.
Does that recommendation then extend from the platform onto the train? Is it like a designated carriage? You know,
but if I mean, you could imagine a situation where if you said, if you need some assistance, come to this point on the platform, and then you get somebody who then actually helps you or makes sure that you are at the front of the queue to get on the train, and that member of staff then ensures that you get the seat, you can get to the seat in order to, you know, get to the seat to get the seat.
Maybe they could just scrap first class and just have a class for disabled people.
They don't need them on short distance trains, do they?
No.
So we've also got cancelled meetings, late for meetings, also paying for taxis, which people have mentioned, missed appointments, resulting in fines, not wanting to walk home and having to pay for taxis as well, because, you know, St Albans is quite dark.
It goes dark.
Yeah, there's no street lights on. So our conclusions, well, there's no contingency planning. So when the trains don't turn up, no one knows where the bus is, no one knows if it's the bus or the bus just goes half empty. There's no one there, no one knows anything if they are there, because no one tells them the truth and they're being told to hide things, and, you know, that's why British Transport Police are usually, because people get annoyed. Not following proper regulations regarding alternative transport when severe disruption occurs. So they don't pay for your taxi, they don't give you alternative accommodation. You know, if you're trapped in Bedford and live in London, how are you meant to get home if you don't know anyone there? And they don't mention that. You have to look it up. They don't actually say, you know, this is black and white. We've also, so we've got property prices potentially or falling because of people, as everyone said. They're going to see, well, I don't want to live there, it takes me 3 hours to get home when it should take 20 minutes. Poor information discrepancies between apps, platforms, boards and actual services. So, I mean, I mentioned this earlier with my financial, I smashed my phone because the board was telling me something and the app was telling me another, and the train wasn't there, and I just got so pissed off and I threw it on the floor. So the recommendations don't have a hissy fit. So our recommendations are better fare structures, better communication. You know, they should tell us on the ticket, really. It says, you know, you have to look at the website, blah, blah, blah. No, it should say to you, if you're buying a peak time ticket, it is valid from this time to this time. That's it. Off-peak is valid from this time. I mean, it turns out I was travelling illegally for the last year because I was getting a super off-peak, but in fact I was getting in London too early. That's why my ticket wasn't working, but no one said that.
We'll edit that out.
Off the record.
Not willingly. But we got fair compensation, a greater percentage of season ticket costs. Also, we've been talking about the carnet or the carnage tickets, where, you know, you don't get compensated, or, you know, if you're on a certain type of ticket, you don't get compensated because it's, you know, bloody systematic rubbish, you know.
£1.50 or something.
If you pay more, I suppose you get your combo. Apologies should be more regular from the management, not from the frontline staff who can do nothing. You also have to deal with every angry person that gets to the barriers. The conditions of carriage should be made clearer and more accessible to everyone, which we were just talking about. Official apology letters by train companies to employers and or passengers to mitigate any repercussions towards employees, and also more public apologies like that one they put in the Metro a few weeks ago. Well, say if I was, well, I am employed by someone, but if I wasn't the boss and I was, someone else, they could see that in the Metro and, understand what we're talking about. So yeah, that's our thing there. Thank you.
So brilliant feedback. I've got 6 pages of notes here, but thankfully we've also got the video here. Hi. We'll take a look through that, run it back through, and basically, actually I'll let Daisy talk. Daisy, come up, we're going to finish off here. These hall bookings, they like to get you out.
Yeah, that's it. 3 points from me. First of all, thank you all so much for coming. It's really, really valuable. The Facebook group, as you know, has so many posts. It's helped us to generate a huge amount of evidence. And we can put that all together and hopefully try and make sure that this shambles can't ever happen again. So thank you so much for investing your time by coming here and giving so much. As a result of that, we need some volunteers. So we have a small group of 4 or 5 people who put this evening together. It's involved people going to the shops to buy ginger beer. It's involved people getting here ready to put tables and chairs out. It's involved people finding some pens, sorting out AV equipment. It's all done by volunteers. We've now got to bring all these notes together. We've got to write the report. We might have to edit the report. We may need some research doing on the odd point here or there. If you have 20 minutes, you've got half an hour. If you can spare 2 hours on an evening just to research a specific thing, like what promises Thameslink made or what adverts they put out or something like that, if there's anything you're prepared to do, please let us know. And we had one person come forward and say that his part of his job is actually putting reports together for select committees, so he's happy to take a look. Somebody else is a lawyer and said she'll have a little look through the contract to see if there's any grounds for bringing a complaint. If you've got any skills or time at all, please let us know because we can definitely use it. And continue to post in the group, please. Any examples, your personal experience, how frustrating it is, the impact on your life, please keep posting that in the group because we need to get as much as possible and to really monitor the service. And the last thing is, as you know, I'm a Lib Dem. There's a few other Lib Dems here. Some people aren't Lib Dems, apparently this is a thing. But if you are interested at all in joining the party or joining in with our specific campaigns, please talk to any of us and let us know. But otherwise, just thank you and please continue to take part in this passenger group because I do think that all of us together as local residents can make a difference and make sure this doesn't happen again. So thank you very much.